Olivia Carter, an FBI agent in Atlanta, was driving home after wrapping up a major operation against an arms trafficking ring. Exhausted and looking forward to some rest, she never expected a routine traffic stop to turn into a situation that would change her day. Officer Ryan Keller had worked this beat for years. To him, the quiet suburban streets were predictable, uneventful, and safe, just the way he liked it. He knew the familiar faces, the regular traffic patterns, the usual cars parked in driveways. But one evening, as the fading light painted the sky in streaks of orange, a sleek black SUV passed by. It wasn't speeding, it wasn't swerving. By all accounts, it was just another car. But to Keller, something about it felt out of place. Flipped on his lights, the SUV slowed, signaling before pulling to the side of the road. Keller approached the vehicle, one hand resting on his belt, the other hovering near his holster. Inside was a woman, well-dressed, poised, and composed. She rolled down her window, meeting Keller's gaze with an expression that could only be described as steady. No fear, no nervousness, just calm. She handed over her license and registration without a word. Keller glanced at the documents, then at her, back at the documents, and then again at her. Something didn't sit right with him. Maybe it was her calm demeanor. Maybe it was the nice car on a street he didn't think it belonged on. Or maybe it was something he couldn't even name. Whatever it was, Keller decided to dig deeper. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. She answered, polite, direct. "Where are you headed?" Another calm response. Keller didn't like her tone. She wasn't defensive, but she wasn't apologetic either. And that's when the accusations began. First, he claimed her license didn't look right. Then, he started questioning why she was in this neighborhood at all. Called for backup. Neighbors began to watch from windows and lawns. Phones were raised to record. Keller told the woman to step out of the car. She asked why. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her out himself, cuffing her wrists as the growing crowd murmured in confusion. The woman stayed calm, even as she sat on the curb, humiliated under the flashing blue and red lights. But here's the part Keller could never have prepared for. The woman he had just arrested wasn't an ordinary driver. She wasn't just another commuter passing through town. No, this was someone with the power to dismantle everything Keller thought he understood about control and authority. And with one phone call, the one he refused to let her make, everything he knew about his career, his decisions, and his future would change in an instant. The tension in the air was palpable as Officer Keller continued to loom over Olivia, who remained composed on the curb. The cold steel of the handcuffs, a stark contrast to her calm demeanor. She sat there, eyes fixed on Keller, waiting. It was a stare that made him uneasy, as if she already knew what was about to unfold. Keller had never been one to back down from a situation, no matter how small, but there was something about Olivia that made him uneasy. This attempts to assert control were met with her unwavering composure. She had offered him nothing more than her name and a polite request for a phone call. And yet, he wasn't backing off. He gestured for his backup to continue their search of Olivia's car. They rifled through her belongings, pulling out gym bags, a laptop case, even her grocery bags, as if looking for some hidden weapon or contraband. But there was nothing out of place, no sign of anything that would justify this overbearing search. Yet Keller continued, unperturbed, digging through her things with an air of suspicion. "You know," Keller said, almost to himself, "people don't just act like this unless they're hiding something." His voice was sharp, but there was no response from Olivia. He paced back and forth, his patience wearing thin. Olivia's silence only seemed to frustrate him more. "You're not going anywhere until I get some answers," he declared. "You know what this is about, don't you?" Keller barked. Still, Olivia remained silent, as though his words were mere noise, not worth engaging. She'd been in this situation before, but this time there was something more dangerous about it. Something he couldn't see. The search continued, methodical and invasive, but still no cause for arrest, no reason to detain her beyond his growing suspicion. Keller's frustration was evident. He pulled out a notepad, scribbling something down before looking up at her again. "You're under arrest," he said suddenly, the words laced with a sense of finality. Olivia's gaze didn't change. "For what?" she asked calmly. "Obstruction of justice," Keller said, his voice rising slightly. For refusing to cooperate. But Olivia's refusal wasn't about obstruction. It was about her rights. Keller couldn't see it, but the others watching did. She wasn't resisting, but neither was she submitting to the unfairness of the situation. He yanked her roughly to her feet, the handcuffs biting into her wrists as he escorted her to the police car. As she moved, the crowd watched, murmurs of disbelief rippling through them. Phones clicked, capturing every second, but Keller was too focused on his next move to care about the eyes on him. Olivia's calmness remained, even as Keller shoved her into the back of the squad car. The doors slammed shut, but it was clear to anyone watching that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just a routine stop anymore. This was a moment when power had been abused. Yet Keller remained oblivious, convinced he had done his job, and that he had the upper hand. But the thing about power is that it's easy to lose, and Officer Keller was about to find out just how weak his power really was. As Keller stood there, a frown tugging at the corners of his lips, a sleek black car glided silently into view, its headlights cutting through the night. The crowd, sensing something was about to happen, grew still. The sound of the car door opening seemed to echo in the tense air, and all eyes turned toward the newcomer. From the car emerged a man dressed sharply in a suit, his demeanor unwavering. With each step he took toward Keller, the energy around the scene shifted. A quiet murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Their curiosity piqued. Keller barely registered the man's approach before his eyes landed on the badge, a gleaming, official FBI badge. His breath hitched as he read the words printed across it. Agent Marcus Hill. "I'm here for Agent Olivia Reed." Hill's voice cut through the stillness, calm but firm. His words rang like a bell in the tense night air, a warning that Keller could not ignore. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and Keller's world narrowed. His face went pale as he realized the truth that had eluded him. The woman he had arrested, the one he had humiliated and restrained, was no ordinary civilian. She was an off-duty FBI agent, one of his own. Hill didn't wait for Keller to respond. With a measured step, he closed the gap, his voice colder now. "Remove the handcuffs. Now." Keller, frozen in place, stammered, his mind racing for some form of justification, but none came. He reached for his keys, fumbling as he unlocked the handcuffs with shaking hands. The cold metal slipped off Olivia's wrists, and she stood, the calm stillness never leaving her. She turned to face Keller, who for the first time seemed to shrink under her gaze. "I told you," she said quietly, almost to herself. "You didn't listen." The crowd, which had grown in numbers and intensity, was now completely silent. Phones were still raised, capturing every second of the revelation. Some bystanders exchanged glances, realizing they had witnessed something monumental, a moment where the truth had pierced through the fog of a false narrative. Olivia didn't seem to hold any ill will toward Keller, but the weight of the moment wasn't lost on her. She had been wronged, publicly humiliated, but now her identity had been revealed, and justice was about to unfold. Agent Hill stepped forward, his authority unwavering. "Keller, your actions will be reported immediately. You've violated procedures, and there will be consequences. You may want to start preparing your report." Keller could hardly meet Hill's gaze. He had believed the narrative he created, that Olivia was just another troublemaker. But now, with the truth revealed, the magnitude of his mistake weighed heavily on him. The public, the crowd, the witnesses, they all knew what had just happened, and Keller was no longer in control. He was exposed. As Olivia stood tall, her eyes locked onto Keller's, there was no trace of anger, only the silent acknowledgement of what was to come. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the first cracks in Keller's armor had begun to show. The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Keller stood there, his face now drained of color, his body rigid with shock. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, the onlookers, the cameras, and above all, Agent Hill's unwavering gaze. The air around them seemed to thicken, as if the night itself was holding its breath. "You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs," Hill said, his voice carrying authority that Keller couldn't escape. "Your actions tonight won't go unnoticed." Keller stammered, his thoughts jumbled as he struggled to find the right words. "But I thought she—" "No," Hill cut him off sharply. "You thought wrong." The crowd around them remained still, their phones capturing every moment. A few murmured among themselves, exchanging uncertain glances. The reality of what they had just witnessed began to sink in. A law enforcement officer abusing his power in the most public way, and now a higher power had intervened. Keller's jaw clenched as the realization hit him. His career, his very reputation, was teetering on the edge. His gut twisted with regret, but it was too late. He had crossed a line, and there was no way to erase the damage. Olivia, now standing with Hill, felt the weight of the moment. She hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, she had acted with patience, keeping her cool while the system had failed her. But she knew that sometimes justice didn't come in the form of a verdict or a ruling. Sometimes it came when someone stood up to the truth, and that's exactly what she had done tonight. As the officers prepared to leave, Olivia remained standing, a silent witness to the chaos Keller had created. His career was ruined, his actions laid bare before the world. But for Olivia, it wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. "What do you think will happen to him now?" a bystander asked, the crowd slowly dispersing as the tension began to lift. Olivia didn't answer immediately, but when she did, her voice was steady. "There are consequences for actions, and tonight he learned that." As Agent Hill and Olivia walked toward their car, the night seemed to return to normal, quiet, still. But the damage had already been done. Keller's mistake would ripple through the department for months, and Olivia would carry the weight of this moment with her for much longer. But as the two agents drove off into the night, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Keller's punishment wasn't just about his career. It was about reminding everyone that power can never be unchecked, that accountability will always find a way to surface. And in the end, justice was served, not just in the form of the consequences Keller would soon face, but in the way truth always manages to break through. What would you have done in Agent Olivia's position? Do you think the punishment Keller faced was enough? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story of justice inspiring, hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories where the truth always finds a way to surface.